Rawlins, Wyoming, winter 1891. The wind did not whistle like a train's call. It groaned low and tired like the breath of land worn down by time, like the earth itself had noticed that one more stranger had arrived with nowhere to land. Nora Vance stepped down from the final car, her boots striking the platform with a hollow thud, a sound that did not echo but settled. In one hand she gripped the handle of a weather-stained trunk. In the other, deep in the lining of her wool coat, she kept a folded letter creased with red, nearly memorized. The words lived inside her now. I don't want a bride, I want a partner. Royce Mercer had written that. Widower, age 59, looking for steadiness, not decoration, not youth, steadiness. And she 58, honest, worn in like leather, softened by the years she believed him. The platform was almost empty. Snow light as flour dust crusted the boards. Two boys tossed pebbles down the track and didn't look up. The station agent glanced her way, said nothing, and then she saw him. Royce Mercer. Clean coat, trimmed mustache, hat pulled low over a brow that twitched at the sight of her. He stepped out from behind a stack of freight like a man not ready for reality. His eyes moved too slow across her face to her hands to her trunk. Then he spoke. You're Miss Vance. I am. She didn't smile. She didn't offer pleasantries. She didn't need to. He hesitated. I thought you'd be younger. Let it hang in the air, Nora. Let it stretch like a rope between you. I'm 58, she said, and I got here on time. He fumbled. I didn't mean offense, I was hoping to start a family. Raise children? I should have been clearer. You were clear, she replied. You just didn't write what you were thinking. And then she said the truest thing a woman can say, a thing carved from every year she's had to carry alone. I didn't come here to bear sons for strangers. He looked away. His jaw clenched. I'm sorry, he said. This won't work. And just like that, he turned and walked off the platform. Did not ask if she had shelter. Did not offer a ride. Did not look back. The train behind her groaned and slipped into the white distance. Nora stood still, the trunk at her side, the snow whispering things no one else could hear. She had known disappointment, but this had teeth. The clerk opened the window beside her. Next eastbound train's Thursday, he said. You can leave that trunk inside if you want. No one will touch it. She paused, then bent low, lifted the handle. I'll carry it, she said. And she did. She walked off that platform with her shoulders upright, her coat gathered, her boots slow and steady. Because it wasn't her first time being left behind, and it wouldn't be the last. But she hadn't come west to be chosen. She came because she'd answered a question honestly, and sometimes for a woman with nothing but her name and a promise that is the bravest thing in the world. The sun was low over Rawlins when she reached the edge of town. Nora Vance had left the station without direction, just her trunk in one hand and the weight of a long journey in the other. No one called to her. No one waved. Her coat snapped in the wind. Her boots thudded against the frost-stiff boards of Main Street like slow drum beats, steady, deliberate. Rawlins didn't welcome. Rawlins didn't warn. It simply watched. She passed the general store. A boy sweeping the stoop paused, didn't speak, didn't nod, just stared like he was memorizing something he didn't understand. The church bell rang once hollow bored and fell quiet again. And Nora, carrying all the years of silence behind her, did not slow. She wasn't here to be pitied. She wasn't here to beg. At the edge of the street, she stopped to catch her breath. Her trunk bumped against her boot with each step now. Her hands, red through worn gloves, trembled from cold, from effort, from everything unnamed. That's when he spoke. You look like you're dragging more than what you packed. She turned. A man leaned against the livery post, broad in the shoulders, coat patched in the arm, a face weathered like prairie stone. No smile, but not unfriendly. That depends, she said. You offering help or judgment? He stepped down, one foot, then the other, slow, steady, as if he'd been waiting all day for someone to ask that question. Help don't come with strings, he said. Judgments for men who don't hold doors. She studied him. A flicker of something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or just the weary understanding of two people who knew what it was to be looked past. "You got a place to set it down?" he asked. "You always invite strangers to supper, only the ones still standing after being dropped." She didn't answer. She lifted the trunk again, not out of pride, but because there was no other way forward, and she followed him. The ride out of town was slow, the kind of slow that listens instead of asks. The wagon creaked, snow packed under the wheels. The horse plodded without urgency. Beside her, the man said nothing. She didn't either. But silence has many voices, and some of them are kind. "You come west for him?" he asked once. "I came west for honesty," she replied. "Didn't find much." He let that hang in the air. "Man's a fool," he muttered. "No," she said. "A fool don't know better." He knew. They didn't speak again until the trees thickened and a cabin rose beyond the ridge, modest-built low chimney smoking against the gray sky. Inside it smelled of pine and strong coffee. He carried her trunk without asking. Set it down near the fire. Motioned toward the chair. "Stove's hot. Chair's yours." "I don't ask questions after dark." She studied the room. One room, two chairs, a stove that ticked like a clock, a silence that didn't press. "You live alone long enough to know it don't mean empty." She looked at the wood floor, the way it bore scuff marks from one man's steps. Then softly, "I had goats once. They ate everything but the Bible and the fence." He chuckled just once, enough to count. "That make you a widow or a shepherd?" "Both," she said. "But I buried the man, let the goats run." And then they said nothing, not out of awkwardness, but out of peace. Outside, the snow deepened. Inside, the fire burned slow and loyal. She rocked in her chair. He mended a bootlace. No one tried to prove anything. And in that quiet room with no ceremony, no pronouncements, no need for permission, Nora Vance felt perhaps for the first time in a long time that she had not arrived too late. She had arrived exactly on time. The snow deepened that night, settling like it meant to stay. Inside the cabin, the fire burned slow and loyal. Pine cracked in the stove. Shadows danced across the walls. Nora Vance sat in the rocker, wrapped in a quilt boot still on. Gideon Blake sat nearby, patching the laces on a worn boot, hand steady. No words passed between them. None were needed. Outside, the wind stirred. Not loud, but sure. And the kind of silence that followed was not peace. It was warning. Then came the knock. 3 raps. Sharp. Clean. Too clean for a man lost in weather. Gideon rose without a word. He reached for the rifle by the door like it was part of him. Nora didn't flinch. She didn't ask. She only folded the quilt tighter around her legs and kept her eyes on the flame. The door creaked open. Cold rushed in. "Evening," said the man on the porch. "Name's Jed Carver. Horse snapped a leg 2 miles back. Been walking since sundown. You folks got a floor I can borrow." He looked rough, not ragged. Coat soaked to the bone. Hair slick with frost. But his eyes moved too fast. "You hurt?" Gideon asked. "Only cold," Jed said. "Only tired. You armed only with charm." Jed smiled. Gideon didn't return it. "Blankets by the fire. Floor's yours. Keep your hands to yourself." Jed stepped inside like he owned the air. He saw Nora. He saw the trunk. He saw the room. And his smile thinned. "Didn't figure you two for a couple," he said. Nora looked up. Her voice was iron. "That's because you assumed too much?" He chuckled and dropped near the fire. Too close to her trunk. Too close to what mattered. "Storm'll trap us in," he said, stretching out. "No use worrying tonight." "I'm not worried," Gideon said. "That makes one of us," Jed muttered. But later, when the fire snapped soft and the room settled, his breathing stayed too even, too measured. Nora whispered low, "He's not asleep." "I know," Gideon answered. She paused. "Then you want to tell it?" Gideon stared into the flame. "My brother brought a man home after the war. Said he'd saved his life. Turned out he'd rather take mine." She nodded. Nothing more. They didn't trade wounds for pity, only recognition. Outside, the wind clawed at the corners. Inside, something stronger stayed rooted, a stillness that would not be moved. By morning, the cold had not left, nor had Jed. He sat up too fast for a man worn down, grinned like nothing had passed. Nice fire, he said. You folks sure know how to keep a guest alive. Nora said nothing. You always offer shelter to strangers, Jed asked. Only when the storm's meaner than the man, Gideon replied. Jed looked at Nora again. Slower this time. Ain't many women like you out here. She didn't blink. Good. Then no one'll compare me when I throw you out. He laughed, sharp, then lunged for the rifle by the door. But Gideon was there first, body to body. They crashed into the wall. Jed came up with a knife. Nora was already standing. The revolver was in her hand steady. Drop it, she said. Jed turned. You're bluffing. Try me, she said, low and sure. He looked from Gideon to Nora. Her stance didn't waver. I've buried worse, she said, and I'm not in a forgiving mood. Jed's hand opened. The knife clattered. You're both crazy, he muttered. No, Gideon said. We just keep what's ours. Get out, Nora said. Jed stepped back, teeth clenched. You throw me out, I'll freeze. Then move fast, Gideon said. Jed slammed the door like it meant something. Nora lowered the gun, set it behind the flour tin. Gideon watched her for a long moment. You've done that before, enough to know when not to wait on someone else. He nodded, and just like that the room returned to its rhythm. The fire crackled. The snow held its breath. 2 chairs, 1 stove, a woman who didn't blink, and a man who didn't ask for more than what mattered. And in that kind of silence, earned, kept unshaken, something holy stayed alive. By morning the wind had softened, but the quiet stayed. Jed was gone. The snow bore only 1 set of tracks leading away. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low but steady, and Nora Vance sat in the rocker once again, her hands wrapped around a mug Gideon had filled without asking. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But something had shifted, small, subtle, certain. He fixed the hinge on the back door that day, crouched low in the snow, while the sun peeked between clouds. Nora watched from the porch for a while, then pulled on her coat and stepped outside, dragging the shovel behind her. They worked the southern fence together. Hammer, wire, pull, brace. Post is crooked, she said. So's the ground, he replied. You fix one, the other leans harder. He looked up then, just a glance, not a pause. Still worth setting right. They said nothing else for half an hour. Just hands moving wood, creaking snow, crunching beneath boots that had known harder winters. That evening, when Nora came in from the pump cheeks red and coat damp, she found a second chair moved closer to the fire. Her trunk had been nudged gently to make room. He didn't mention it. She didn't either, but she sat in it. And sometimes that's all it takes. Later, as the fire settled low and the cabin filled with the scent of pine smoke and coffee, Gideon poured her another cup. There's a dance next Saturday, he said. She raised an eyebrow. You dance poorly, he admitted. But not alone if I can help it. She sipped slow. The fire caught the edge of her smile, but only briefly. You asking me to be stared at in a room full of people who already decided who I am? No, he said. I'm asking if you'll stand beside me while they try to figure out why I'm smiling more than usual. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not a man trying to rescue her. Not a man ashamed of his past, but a man standing in it, unafraid. You sure, she asked. He shrugged. I've been sure of less and asked more. She didn't answer. Not yet, but she didn't say no, and that was enough. The sky over Rawlins cleared come Saturday evening. Even the clouds seemed curious. Nora Vance stepped down from the wagon, slow and sure. Her dress wasn't fancy, but it was clean, pressed, her coat buttoned neat. Hair pinned back with a single strand of lavender ribbon pulled from the bottom of her trunk, a memory turned into adornment. A ribbon not worn for them, worn for herself. The town hall glowed warm with lamplight in the sound of fiddle music and boots scuffing across the floorboards. Laughter rolled like a creek had thawed after too long frozen. When they stepped inside, the air changed. Eyes turned, voices dropped. Some remembered her from the platform. Others remembered the silence she walked in on. Fewer still remembered the weight of being left. But Gideon didn't present her. He simply walked beside her, one hand open, one nod slow. Still sure, he asked. I don't do things halfway, she said. The music swelled. They stepped forward. Their movement not practiced but paired, not graceful but grounded, not for show, for self. Someone near the punch bowl whispered too loud, "She's too old for that." Nora didn't flinch. "Good," she said to Gideon. "Means I'm dancing for me." "Not them." He smiled. "You always were." They kept going. And by the end of the song, no one whispered. Not because their minds had changed, but because Nora Vance hadn't asked them to. She'd come in quiet boots, with a steady hand, and no apology. And that kind of woman's solid present whole isn't remembered because the room allows her to be. She's remembered because she showed up anyway. It happened 1 month after the dance. The snow still crusted the hills like salt, but the sky above Rollins had turned from ash to pearl. Cold remained, yes, but something else had settled too. A quiet certainty. At the chapel on the edge of town, no taller than a barn, no grander than a room that had seen too many farewells, lamplight glowed against its windows. The bell above did not ring for the sake of custom. It rang once, because someone wanted it to. Nora Vance stood at the edge of the aisle in a dress of dark blue satin. No veil, no fanfare. The fabric plain but pressed. Her gloves pearl-buttoned, her brooch pinned proper. Her hair was swept up soft at the sides, just the way he'd said he liked it. She walked in alone. No one gave her away. She'd never needed help to stand. But when she reached the front, Gideon Blake extended his hand. Not stiff, not showy, just open. She took it, not to lean on, but to walk beside. He wore a borrowed coat, boots shined, collar starched, and a face that was not handsome, not polished, but true. It was the face of a man who had chosen quietly and meant it. The chapel held 6 pews. They were full enough. 3 ranch hands from Gideon's fence-mending days, a widow from the feed store, the blacksmith's son, a school teacher who smiled like she knew a good story when she saw one. They came not for spectacle, but because they'd watched something rise from winter ground. The preacher was older than fence posts with a Bible worn at the edges. His voice was low, not practiced. The kind of voice that didn't push, only offered. "Do you take this woman?" he asked. Gideon didn't hesitate. "I already have. And you, Nora Vance, do you take this man?" She smiled, not the kind meant for guests, the kind that reaches from the inside out, a smile with history behind it. "I reckon he took me in before he knew he had." There was a pause, then the preacher, after a breath and a nod, said the words that mattered. "By grace and ground you are husband and wife." They kissed. Quiet, sure, like the final word in a letter too long delayed. And when they turned to face the room, no one clapped. No one rose. They simply nodded. Because some unions do not require applause, only witness. That Sunday the wind held its tongue. The prairie was still. Even the town dogs seemed to hush their bark. The world for a moment seemed to understand what had occurred. Joy didn't leap. It settled. Later, after the chairs had been pushed back and the stove at the back of the chapel had cooled, they walked out into the winter air. The sky was soft and white above them, a gray too pale to be sorrow, a blue too faint to be celebration. But it held them just the same. Gideon offered her his arm again. She took it, because she wanted to, because the silence between them no longer asked for translation. And in that step, 2 boots side by side on frozen earth, a ribbon still tucked in her coat, a borrowed ring warming her glove. Nora Vance became something more than bride, more than wife. She became chosen, and he standing beside her became the kind of man who never looked away, not once. Not ever. The ride home was slow, not from snow, from stillness, the kind that settles when nothing more needs proving. Gideon drove the wagon steady through the frost-hushed night. Beside him, Nora leaned back, her gloved hand resting lightly on the edge of the bench. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The sky above was dark velvet, stitched with stars. The air pressed close like wool, a quiet cocoon, worn soft by winter and time. At the cabin, the fire had gone out, but the coals still glowed. Gideon held the door open. Nora stepped through. Her trunk waited by the wall, silent, faithful, unchanged. A witness to all that had passed. He poured water into the kettle, set it on the stove. "Coffee at this hour?" she asked, a corner of her mouth lifting. "Only for company that matters," he said. They stood by the hearth, neither one rushing. The kind of pause that knows it is welcome. Then she turned. You never asked why I came, she said. Didn't need to, he replied. And you never asked if I planned to stay. He looked at her then full and steady. No hesitation. You already did. She stepped close enough that their coats brushed. He didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. And she didn't wait for him to. The kiss came not like lightning, not like spark, but like dawn, inevitable, quiet, and real. A sealing of truth, not a start. A breath, not a question. And in that small, ordinary cabin where nothing was promised but wood smoke and warmth, Nora Vance knew what it meant to be chosen. Not for beauty, not for youth, not for what she could offer or fix or carry, but for simply being. The seasons shifted quietly. The snow did not melt in a blaze. It withdrew inch by inch, like an old sorrow folding itself into memory. One Sunday morning, the chapel bell rang again. Not for grief, not for habit, but for joy. A joy that had no trumpet, only presence. Inside they lived without ceremony. Bread on the table, coats hung side by side. A second cup always poured. A second chair always pulled near. Outside, Gideon worked the fence. Nora mended shirts on the porch. They didn't speak often, but when they did, it was enough. He would say ground still soft past the ridge. She'd reply, I've known softer things that held more weight. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they didn't. But the silence never stretched too long. There were no visitors, no declarations. But the dog always stayed near. One night by firelight, Nora opened the drawer of her trunk and pulled out the letter. The one Royce had written. The one that had led her here. She held it up, watched its edges glow red in the flames, then curl inward, blackening, breaking. It burned easy, like something that no longer belonged. She whispered, not loud, not bitter, just clear home isn't measured in inches. Gideon looked up from his chair. He didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded, like he'd heard her anyway. And outside, beneath a sky wide enough to carry both sorrow and redemption, winter released its hold. Inside, the heat stayed, not from the fire alone, from the choosing, from the sharing, from the knowing. And though no one rode by to see it and no choir sang to mark it, a kind of hymn was sung that night. Not in voices, in footsteps, in wood creaking beneath the same worn boots. In the hush between heartbeats when two people finally understand we are not saved by applause. We are saved by the quiet mercy of being seen and loved still.